Good morning, Matt
Good
Waldman.
morning,
How are
Bob
you this
Harris.
morning? Look at you go. You're right
Yeah.
on all in your places with bright, shiny faces. We're all set here as we like training camps pretty much in full force. Those that have not yet started as of today will be starting this week. By the end of the week, everyone will be out on the field doing footballish things.
Is there a
Will be
training camp truancy officer?
No, there is not. Well, there is, but it's like an accountant who assesses fines and whatnot.
Oh, one of them. Okay.
Yeah, well, and I
Yeah.
like that. There are a few people. Well, we'll get into this here pretty
Hall
early on.
monitors.
There are some hall monitors who are eagerly awaiting the arrivals of some players. One of those is Brandin Aiyuk, who has demanded a trade, requested, however you want to say it. We've seen this before.
Asked nicely.
2012.
Pretty pleased with sugar on top.
The 49ers, there is no asking nicely, right? This
Yeah.
is not the 49ers way. We've seen this with Deebo Samuel in 2022. They took him right out to July 31st before he got his deal done after demanding a trade. Last year, Nick Bosa, all the way into September before he got his deal done. They just, this is their negotiating style. And as little as we like it, or Brandin Aiyuk might like it, he's scheduled to make $14.1 million, obviously underpaid in the final year of his contract. He'd like that $30 million a year. I've been told they have offered him something less than the $28 million a year that Amon-Ra St. Brown got from the Lions. So there's also been talk of potential trades. And so Mike Florio reported this week that 5 teams, expressed interest in trading for him. The current word is the 49ers have, this is Adam Schefter's words, no intention of trading him, which means the door's wide open at my house, right? Like, no intention can quickly turn into an intention. So let's pretend that's on the realm of possible outcomes. What is the destination you're feeling most for Brandin Aiyuk, not San Francisco?
Okay, well, how about multiple choice? I know Dallas was one of them. Who were some of the other options that
he's mentioned the Commanders, the Patriots have been mentioned heavily, the Raiders have been talked about. They didn't have a list of the teams, the 5 teams that contacted him and expressed interest, but I think some of those teams were definitely in the mix then. Most notably, the Commanders and Patriots have been mentioned multiple times.
Please, God, no, because you're just going to ruin a perfectly good player who's going to have to wait like 2 years to get a quarterback. Even if Jaden Daniels shows signs, I just don't think you're going to get the most out of Brandin Aiyuk, who's a timing route player, and with Daniels, he's just not a good timing quarterback just yet. He might develop into that. Drake May is definitely not a good timing quarterback just yet. So really, to me, it would be a team like Dallas, even though, we're going to talk about CeeDee Lamb and their own negotiation there, but it's just because if you can get 2 number 1 type receivers for Dak Prescott, this team should be a favorite to be, go deep into the playoffs and play the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, or the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. So for me, I would rather see him go to a team with a good quarterback. He's already on a team with a good quarterback, so I think that the best thing to happen would be for him to stay the fuck right there.
The best thing that would be happening then would be trading Deebo Samuel, correct?
Oh, absolutely. You want to trade Deebo Samuel.
There's no road to the target. It seems like there's not a road to that robust, that CeeDee Lamb level targeting, or, that super high end, targeting that we see for the receivers we love the most.
Yeah.
160, 150, somewhere in that range. Can we, I mean, that seems like it's unlikely in San Francisco.
Because Deebo is really a gadget player. He is the highest end gadget player in the NFL. He's great in the run game. He's good when you're motion him across formations. He is not very good against man-to-man press coverage, timing routes of that type of sort. Put him in zone after the catch, that's great. Jaden Daniels, he could do pretty good with Daniels and with the Commanders. He could do pretty good with the Patriots if they decided to spruce up their offense a little bit and do some things to use him. I think there are teams where you could get instant production out of him, but the ceiling of production that you could get with a good quarterback isn't as strong as what you'd get with Aiyuk. So I would want to keep Aiyuk in San Francisco. And I think the 49ers are just good negotiators. So that just means that they're going to stretch things out. We're going to hear all this angst for a while. And Brandin Ayuk's probably going to stay a 49er because he is, you could talk about all the things that Deebo Samuel does that makes a defense makes it difficult to defend. And that's true. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about the pivotal moments in games where the defense says, we've stopped you, we're going to make you do what you don't want to do against our top guy. Do you have a route runner who can do that and who can win it in tight coverage in that moment? And the answer is an Aiyuk or maybe a Ricky Pearsall one day, but it's not Deebo Samuel as good as he is at what he does.
Right. And then so I went to double check the target. The highest target share or highest number of targets was 114 2 years ago. He's been really efficient. Obviously, with the targets he get, it was 105 last year, somewhere in that range. So would love to see him, bump that up just a little bit and really see what kind of receiver we're going to unleash. I don't know if that's going to happen for him in San Francisco, but I do agree with you. I think that's San Francisco is where he remains, and a deal will get done, and everyone will be relatively happy once it's there. The Cowboys, we mentioned CeeDee Lamb. The team is going to prioritize negotiations with him as they head into training camp because he's not going to show up. Dak Prescott needs an extension too. He is going to show up and work as normal. So CeeDee Lamb, I haven't seen anyone back off, right? Like I haven't seen him go outside the top 3 this year. Is that the correct? Are you feeling that is the correct pricing? Where do you have CeeDee Lamb? And is there anything that would dial you off him?
Totally feeling, and I think I have him as wide receiver 2 in my rankings, top 3 for sure. So, I'm not going to remember the exact of where I ranked him, but I know it's top 3. And I don't think anything's going to change unless there's just an injury or we get into like late August and he's not in camp. I'd say by second week of August, I'll get a little nervous and think, okay, maybe we need to let's see what we're hearing in terms of the ugliness of the negotiation factor. But I honestly think that they're going to get this done because I think that CeeDee Lamb is more important to the long-term future than maybe even Dak Prescott, just because they do have some quarterback possibilities in place. Maybe not nearly as good as Prescott at this stage. But I think.
Are you talking about Trey Lance?
I am talking about Trey Lance. I still believe.
Make it clear.
I still believe. I mean, come on now.
Put it out there.
Yeah. So I think that Lamb's just so versatile at what he does that he's arguably a top 10 receiver as a split end, a flanker, or a slot. And
is that the key to his greatness? That versatility, not to mention the speed, which I'm looking up.
I think really it's just the all-around game. The fact that he is an unbelievable aerial ball winner. He's tough as nails. He could play in the NFC East back in the 1980s and have been a possession receiver. But he also has that great run after the catch ability. To me, I mean, like if you put him in San Francisco's offense with Jerry Rice, he could have played the Jerry Rice or the John Taylor role, and he could have been bananas in an offense like that.
I talked to John, and I agree, and he is my number 1 wide receiver, and I hope people start dialing back as they get fearful. I hope the negotiations get super contentious. We all know that's the most acrimonious portion of negotiations, or the public portion, while the work is getting done behind the scenes. right just like trying to stir up all the angst that they can among the fan base in hopes of gaining an iota of leverage, and so that's when I'm going to be pouncing even more. I hope I get some bargains on CeeDee Lamb before all is said and done. And the same with Aiyuk, by the way, he's dropped like about 4 spots in ADP on Underdog. He's gone from 12 to 16. If he drops much farther, he's going to turn into a value for me. I'll start looking to reap some of those shares, some of those discount shares, and we'll be doing the same with Lamb. Brandin Cooks already a discounted player. I mean, it wasn't great last year. A lot of talk right now. John Machota from The Athletic is reporting that the connection, and he told me this himself, John Machota, like last month. He said, man, in OTAs, don't sleep on Brandin Cooks because the connection is there this year. Feeling or fucking Brandin Cooks as your wide receiver 5.
Oh, feeling that. I'll take him as a wide receiver 4, and I think you'll often get to play him as a wide receiver 3.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean he's a good outside receiver who they put in the slot in key situations where they can get matchups either for Lamb or Cooks. He's very good in zone and works his way open. He's maybe not a contested catch fiend, but he's very good after the catch, runs good zone routes. To me, he's a great complement to what CeeDee Lamb does. And he's one of the most underrated receivers over the past 10 years because he's moved around so much, but he's produced wherever he's moved. And I think that that's something that 100%. We can be we can definitely say, yeah, if you get him at wide receiver 5, you're doing well.
He is wide receiver 59 right now in ADP, going in round 11. So jump on, kids. It'll be it's Lex Luthor. Who's Lex Luthor?
I don't know, but anybody else see separation at birth here? I see a little bit of that. I just thought I would throw that in there. It's Monday. I need to brighten that up a little bit. And Bob Harris is the greatest villain of fantasy football of all time.
It's
have
true.
To say that.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that. Feeling
all
it.
Right.
No fucking that. Joe Mixon. Let's talk about Joe Mixon. He expects a lot of work, and I expect him to get a lot of work. As good as this offense was, the rushing attack was not on point yet. Still, even with one of the worst rushing attacks, I think it ranked 29th in the league last year, Devin Singletary got the kind of volume that made him a viable weekly starter once he took over for Damian Pierce. They bring in Joe Mixon, who's been, top 12 finisher very often, has really good numbers in the red zone, playing with a quarterback that's not a running quarterback or not a huge threat in goal line situations. Give me a percentage. What's the percentage you feel Mixon delivering running back 1 production, or fuck you, Bob, if you don't feel it at all?
75 to 80%, I think. And I think, one of the guys, I saw a tweet last night from Sam Howell's twin brother over at Fantasy Life, Dwayne McFarland, who was talking about how
Dwayne has better hair.
Yeah, Dwayne does have better hair. That's true. But that's because his wife supplies him all that hair product. That's what I heard. But
me too.
Yeah. See, there you go. It's a fine removal product, I must say. But at the same time, listen, Dwayne was talking about the volume thing and saying that, when Bobby Slowick said that this guy's a workhorse, and he said I used to not pay attention to that kind of stuff,
right.
But I feel like when I hear volume, it perks my antenna up, and I think he's right about that.
When you hear volume coming from somebody who's been associated with the San Francisco 49ers offense, that adds to that. Slowick, one of the many coaches, coming directly from San Francisco, Clint Kubiak in New Orleans, another one has said similar things about Alvin Kamara. We're getting the McCaffrey usage, kids. And I don't care if they're not as good as McCaffrey, if they're getting that kind of usage. I mean, again, last year, McCaffrey had the most touches in the NFL. They don't like to take him off the field. 272 carries, 339, I want to say, total touches. So, if you're looking at that kind of volume, there are issues with Joe Mixon. He's not the breakaway threat. I think that's why the Bengals moved on with him. Our buddy Zeri Kansabedian at Football Guys has him the lowest breakaway rate since 2020 of top 12 running backs. But the volume matters, man. I don't know if Devin Singletary is a huge breakout threat either.
I love Zara, but here's the thing. We had all these people love Tony Pollard. They love Tony Pollard because he's the fast guy. And then he had to play in an offense where he wasn't the guy who was the change of pace, who wasn't the one that defenses had to key on you. And yeah, we could say, I had some boo-boos and I couldn't stay healthy. And there's some thought to that. But at the same time, I think in fantasy football, we get hooked on the speedy guy who should somehow get more carries. And then when he doesn't, we come off of him as fast as possible. And I think that it's the same thing when it comes to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon played behind an offensive line that wasn't all that great.
True.
And he is an all-around guy like Ezekiel Elliott was an all-around guy, maybe even more enticing as a physical prospect. And if Houston can provide the O-line work that the Bengals couldn't, he's going to be a doubles and triples hitter as a runner in this lineup all year long, and probably will be a low-end running back 1 at the very least.
I feel like you're veiled assault on my dignity and your assessment of people being overly interested in the speed aspect of players.
I was just talking about your hair.
Okay. I love Joe Mixon. Chances of delivering RB1 production, I agree with you, is high. And Cam Akers signed, by the way, and he is there to compete for a roster spot. He's behind Damian Pierce. Don't get too excited about that, people. We're all getting more excited ever since our buddy Cecil Lammy over at Football Guys.
Talk about hair.
There you go. Look, man.
I mean, look, I barely have any as it is. So.
There we go.
Right.
So we heard Lammy about a month ago, make the proclamation. Jaleel McLaughlin looks like the top back in this offense, and then he kind of questioned whether Williams would even make the roster. Well, the drumbeat continues. Troy Rank from the Denver Post this weekend wrote a similar thing, basically saying it's, Samaje Perine and Williams are fighting for the same roster spot. And Audric Estime, more assured a roster spot. McLaughlin, more assured a roster spot. I spoke with Parker Gabriel of the Post. He suggested the same. He thought the outcomes could be Williams and Perine being the top two options again this year. Also, neither of them making the team this year. He said it's that wide open in his estimation. So let's pretend, right? Like, so I'm all in on Jaleel McLaughlin. He's still in that running back 50 range. I have so many shares of him. It weighs me down as I walk through the house. So I'm feeling that for sure. But
it weighs you down like the RSP, doesn't it?
It's like carrying the RSP around the house. It's true. But Javonte Williams, let's assume he is on the bubble. Let's assume he doesn't make this team. Is there a system that he would have? Do you feel a system out there he would have a better chance of excelling in?
Yeah, there are a lot of systems where I think that could work out for him. I just think that in the Sean Payton system, they want him to be a little bit more patient with setting up certain runs. So really, you want a team. I think Buffalo would be a good team for him. They could probably, if things don't work out with Ray Davis and they need to bring in a guy who can give them instant production both in the run and the passing game, he could be a good option. The Giants need a backup, and they're going to be running more gap-oriented plays, and I think that he could do a good job with those type of looks. If Nick Chubb doesn't work out and they don't like what they see from Deonta Foreman and Ford, let's say Ford goes, he could be an injury substitute in that particular situation. I mean, look, Dallas, certainly Dallas, he might need a little bit more patience with some of the work that they do there, but Dallas could be another option for him. I just think that Peyton really doesn't like his fit in that system. He does have.
And we all know what happens then. Ask Russell Wilson.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Peyton is from the Parcells school of it's his guys, and he tries to get the other guys out of there as fast as possible. Kind of like Deion. Deion's the same way at Colorado or Primetime or yep. That guy who whined about me spiking his milkshake, which I promise I didn't do. That
you
kind
totally
of thing 30
did.
years ago. No, I didn't, but that's all right. But he did walk in like Ric Flair. It was pretty funny.
So we bring all this up. Audric Estime, the Notre Dame back. How do you feel his fit for Sean Payton's system?
I think that he will obviously be a little bit more timely about setting up blocks, mainly because he just isn't very fast. But seriously, he's a powerful guy. He has pretty good footwork. He could be that Samaje Perine change of pace option, and be a guy that you can use closeout carries, goal line carries, and he could be reasonably good in that situation. But the thing that scares me about guys like him is that if A.J. Dillon, who I think is much faster than than Perine, not Perine, Audric Estime, if Dillon isn't doing all that well in the NFL and some of those backs are there, I worry about Estime. I think Estime is the guy that people look at off of the Notre Dame tape and don't project as well to the NFL.
So this is the Blake Watson comment.
Yes, I think Blake Watson is. Yes. And I think Blake Watson will be a deciding factor, because if he has a good camp and they go, well, we know he can play on special teams, we can find a role for him, then one of those guys is going to, somebody's going to be gone other than Watson. But yeah, I think McLaughlin's the guy that's easily the one you should be most excited about.
Tell me more. I am.
Because of the way that they've talked about him since early May.
Right, it's the drumbeat. We hear it, all the time with players. And this one goes back to last year, but everybody in Denver seems to think this is a guy. The history of Sean Payton with receiving backs, or backs who have been catch-first kind of players, are viewed as Reggie Bush, Pierre Thomas, Alvin Kamara early in his career was, a lot of these players have come on strong. So I'm with you there. And by the way, Blake Watson, undrafted rookie. He's on the non-football injury list. And we'll see when he gets back in the mix. But another player handpicked, unlike Williams, by Sean Payton and his staff. So that's the thing that all those backs have in common. Williams comes from someone else, so the rest of them come from Payton. Yep. Daniel Jones sounds like he will be ready to go. Jordan Renan from ESPN reporting that he will not open camp on the PUP list. We'll see. That'll be tomorrow, I believe. They report Tuesday of that'll be July 23rd. People,
he may close the camp on the sack list, but that's all right.
So what's your confidence level? In Daniel Jones, the quarterback, the player, and if you're saying fuck him, what do you think of Drew Lock?
I think that I think right now with Daniel Jones and what they're paying him and knowing what they've got, they're going to roll with him to start the season. Drew Lock's already come out there and say, "Look, I'm here to back up Daniel Jones." I think part of that too is also that he needed to say that to promote the good attitude that teams need to see from him to be the good soldier. But I think that as long as he has time, I think as long as he has a little bit more time than the average quarterback, I think he can give you top 15 production in fantasy. More from that 12 to 15 range. It's a tight window. Maybe climb into the top 10 with a great year because he does now have a strong rookie receiver who could lead that team in Malik Neighbors. But I think at the end of the day, that run game does give me concern in terms of how productive it's actually going to be. And that means that teams may not respect the run enough, and they're going to come at Daniel Jones often and with a lot of players. And I think Jones is one of those guys that makes erratic decisions or doesn't really get rid of the ball as fast as possible. So I think we're going to see Drew Lock at some point in the season, and I think Drew Lock is capable of playing well enough, especially if he really did get the memo from his experience in Denver and before that, where he was kind of a, how would I best put it, kind of a privileged player who didn't realize how privileged he was until he lost the opportunity to start in Denver. And then I think he realized that going back as far as high school, like his dad said, he just didn't listen to the things he needed to work on to become a top-notch pro that his physical abilities could have afforded him. And I think that what he did in Seattle and the interview that they had after he won that game, helped win that game for them in relief of Geno Smith, I think he's starting to get the memo of what it takes to work in the NFL. Now, it may also mean he got the memo of what he really is in the NFL and that he doesn't want to work and he's okay with being a backup. It's going to be one or the other, but I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to shine, and I think that he would match up very well with Malik Neighbors because he will fit the ball in there. He's a better deep ball thrower, at least from what I've seen on film, in terms of the potential there for him and Daniel Jones. And I think he's not as mobile as Jones, but he can get out of the pocket and create in a way that Jones I'm worried about a little bit. So neither of these guys. Locke is the guy that I'd rather take off the waiver wire and think maybe we could get top 15, top 20, or top 10 production out of him. Jones is the guy that I'm like, I think he's good enough to help this offense get one or two good fantasy players, but I'm not using him other than super flex.
I feel like Jones is the guy who can help you as a fantasy manager accidentally when he has one of those games where he leads the team in rushing, right? I mean, then I think the last time he was healthy, he had 6 of those games, right? Even playing with Saquon Barkley. So, I mean, he's not incapable of running, even if he tends to trip and fall before he hits the end zone, or at least that happened once. Okay,
hey,
so
look, it's hard, man. I mean,
it is hard.
I mean, he was trying to. He just needs to follow the black cat in Giants
There
Stadium.
you go. There you go. Yeah. Obviously, you're not going to be keenly pursuing either Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, whichever the starter is for your frontline fantasy player. You might do that with Jordan Love. As talk today, he's not going to practice in camp until he gets a new deal. It sounds like the team is fine with this, which means that a new deal is imminent. A new deal probably should be imminent. Last year, Matt, down the stretch, final 8 games, Love scored a quarterback-leading 168.5 fantasy points, 21.1 points per game, third behind only Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. He's quarterback 10. Are we feeling that we're underestimating Jordan Love in our average draft position?
Fuck yes, because this is kind of the whole superstition. This is what seeing history and converting it to superstition rather than fact. When we look at quarterbacks and going, well, they had one good year, now they're going to regress to the mean because they're going to get found out, as opposed to understanding why the player had a good year and whether or not that good year is sustainable. And I think that when you look at this offense, they've got 4 capable receivers who I would say 3 of them are capable of giving you top 15 production, depending on which one gets the most targets. That's Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and maybe even Dontavian Wicks. I'd say Romeo Doubs is the guy I'm the most concerned about. long term for this team as being a fantasy viable player, but he's in a position right now where, yeah, wide receiver 3 value is probably high floor, low ceiling type of thing for Dubs. He's safe in that regard, maybe. But with Love, he's got the weapons. He has a run game. He has a good offensive coordinator. And what we saw last year is that all the little details that a lot of young quarterbacks come into a lineup and start doing, and suddenly the things that they thought they knew how to do start to fall apart and deteriorate with their game because they're overthinking the games too fast for them. You didn't see that with Love because of the time that he had to develop. And the only issue that I really saw with him consistently was early in the season when teams played tight man-to-man and blitzed him, and then he started looking like Utah State on a bender Jordan Love. And he corrected that by like mid to late season when the Lions played him again and they played that man-to-man. He said, yeah, fuck you. I've got this covered. And I think that was a really good sign for him. And I'm a believer that Jordan Love is going to be a quality NFL starter in the league, and for fantasy, that means, yeah, if you can get him at 10, I think that's a really good deal. He may not be top 5 or top 3 for you, but I think that he's got a high floor at QB 10.
He showed it last year, that 8-game stretch. So I've talked about this many times, but I think this is just an indication of sometimes, teams' actions speak loudly about players, and everything the Packers did up to installing him as the starter told you they were super confident in his ability to be the starter. And now their continued confidence is demonstrated in no big deal. He's not going to practice till we get a new deal. It's close. He needs to be on the field, but yet we're not very worried, right?
No.
This is a team that knows what they have, and they aren't going to screw around too much. The Baltimore Ravens know what they have in Mark Andrews. He says he's 100% after last year's injury heading into training camp. Isaiah Likely is currently tight end 21. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but let's put it in that context. Are we feeling Isaiah Likely as a value at 21 among tight ends?
Yeah, I think he's a good value because he has a high ceiling in case Mark Andrews does get hurt and he has to take over. And also there's a second path to value, which is if he does get to move around the offense and play multiple roles, including receiver roles, and he gets the volume. The issue with me for that is that Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers are better matchup options on the outside. So you're going to get some scheme plays for Isaiah Likely that may work out. But at the end of the day, is that really going to generate into more volume than those two other receivers? I don't think so. So it's a possibility, but that to me is more of a 15% possibility for him to have that upside of a starter, whereas if he's replacing Mark Andrews, it's more of an 85-90% possibility.
All right, I feel like that's pretty reasonable. My feeling is Isaiah Likely's being overlooked, and for the reasons you said, maybe multiple roles. Also, Todd Monken's long history and recent history at Georgia. He went really heavy with the 2 tight end sets. Maybe we see a little more of that there. And I'm hopeful that Mark Andrews still dominates because I am heavily invested there as well.
As am I.
All right, Keaton Mitchell, no timetable, coming off the ACL. So tell us, feeling her fucking Rasheen Ali, who is coming off an injury of his own.
Well, anybody from Cleveland I gotta like. So I like. He's a Cleveland native. But Rasheen Ali, he runs hard. If you didn't realize he was only 200 pounds, there's moments where you go, looks a little bit like Adrian Peterson in terms of the style and frenetic kind of running style. He is powerful. He's a determined runner with some strong contact balance. Seems to have more speed than tested, or he just looks faster than his actual times are. He's had some breakaway runs. He has some ability to catch a ball and make people miss. There's something about his game where you look at him and go, I want to see more of him in camp, because I think that if he can put it all together, he would surprise as a good contributor, maybe even a short-term starter in the league. But tricep tear, or I think it was either a tricep or bicep tear at the Senior Bowl, but he's probably going to be ready, and I think he already is. Fumbling problems. He has some real fumbling problems. Again, that's a little bit less predictable in terms of whether they resolve that or not. But of the backs that they have behind Derrick Henry, he's the one with the most upside to be like the guy who could replace Derrick Henry in the offense as the load carrier short term.
I'll buy that. So let's look at some of the kind of like lower level players, but that might be interesting to some people out there playing in deeper leagues. JJ McCarthy is considered a long shot to start to open the season. I think that's fair. Feeling fucking Sam Darnold as a viable fantasy prospect, but more importantly, viable enough to keep Justin Jefferson's fires fueled.
All right, let's dispense with the obvious answer and say fuck no, because he's we've already seen what he's done, and it isn't much. But let's go ahead and explore this a little bit more, because even when you say this kind of thing, maybe we should not completely dismiss people, because Josh Dobbs had some nice moments as a guy that I used to say he just needs to go into an aerospace company after watching him at Tennessee. But people can grow. If Sam Darnold does show the growth that that teams have hoped that he would for the past 3 to 5 years, he has that creative side to be able to work through pressure, fend off the physical aspects of pressure, make tough throws on the move, really scramble, fit the ball into tight windows, fearless, confident, some yardage when he breaks the pocket, big arm. I mean, things that you could really get behind. The problem is we just need to see whether or not he can finally read underneath coverage, read blitz disguises and coverage disguises that he hasn't been able to read, and then pressure getting to him is kind of cost him his confidence for a while, where he just is second guessing and third guessing things to the point that he doesn't need to. If he somehow has moved beyond that with the players he has, he could be a hidden star in the league. And if I'm going to give any hope to him, I'll say, listen, if Addison doesn't get too long of a suspension, with Hawkinson and Jefferson, you have one of the best receiving cores in the league. And that should help you level up your game. Generally, when you're a young quarterback and you have that kind of talent, you don't have to overthink a lot of things. So if they can get him not to think too much and just play, I mean, I still think there's a possibility he could give you top 15 production in that world, especially at how late that you're going to be able to draft him.
Right.
If suddenly he starts getting drafted as a top 15 quarterback, I'm not sure I want him. But where he's at, I'll take the late chance.
I feel like he's probably limited in value to 2 quarterback leagues where somebody gets hurt, one of your top 2 get hurt week 1, right? Like,
waiver wire, 1 QB league, go for it.
But I do think, like, we saw, my bigger concern is Justin Jefferson. We saw him he was the return from the hamstring injury late last season, 5 games was a combination of Dobbs, Jaron Hall, and Nick Mullins. He was 3rd in points per game, Justin Jefferson. So he's pretty much able to cobble together. I think he's the least of my worries here in this offense. And I like this offense. I like the coach. I think the quarterbacks, whoever they are going to be coached up enough to get it done. Even if it's J.J. McCarthy at some point, which it may well be. Are you feeling Rashid Shaheed, who got an extension this week, emerging as a viable wide receiver 2 and fantasy option in this offense?
I think I do. I think that, one, we know he's a deep threat, and we know that he can provide you some work after the catch. But one thing that he did very well at Cal and early on with New Orleans when they did feature him in this way is he can work over the middle and make some tough plays. And I think he's getting better as a route runner every year. So with Chris Olave opposite him, I think he can give that to you. So I'm enthusiastic about it, especially the value that you can get him at.
That seems reasonable. We've got a little talk that Marshawn Lloyd could have an early impact in Green Bay. Are you feeling that? And if you are, what can he deliver if the opportunity arises?
Okay, so I'm feeling the possibility of that, just because if he can correct the fumbling issues, and then I think they're going to get him out in space enough and give him plays that really fit to what he does well. And he could probably give you running back 4 production in fantasy, where some weeks he's going to give you, high-end starter value. And you can maybe stream that or use that in a flex situation. If Josh Jacobs gets hurt, then you could see Lloyd really shine as a running back 2, maybe running back 1. And listen, Matt LaFleur, this has been talked about. J.J. Zachariason said this on my show last week or a couple weeks ago. When you look at Matt LaFleur, when he was in Tennessee, he was trying to force feed a Dion Lewis, Derrick Henry combination until they finally said, dude, really just put Dion Lewis on the bench. Come on, we've got Derrick Henry. But he likes to split things up, and he thought that they were going to keep Aaron Jones, apparently.
He did.
And so that meant that they thought Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones were going to be a tandem. So that gives credence to the idea that Lloyd could have an early impact and should have an early impact. But you know what? The other side of this is this. Jacksonville, this time last year, said, take Bigsby, should have an early impact. And he was ripping up camp and doing fantastic. And then the lights came on and nobody was home. And so that's the thing we got to be careful about with players like Lloyd, because Lloyd, like Bigsby, is a guy who bounces things outside. Lloyd has a track record of fumbles that I don't think Bigsby had as bad of a track record, but fumbled and dropped passes and forced interceptions multiple times, and then they just had to get him out of the lineup. If Lloyd has that kind of a poor presence early on, then it's going to be the Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon show, in Green Bay. So it's possible. I just wouldn't overpay just yet.
Okay, one last one here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, your little news, he was cleared from the non-football injury list. I don't think that's a big deal. I think that the bigger issue is, what the hell happened to that guy? And also, are you feeling him as, or is he an overlooked handcuff for Isaiah Pacheco, whose hard running style, very physical style of play, maybe opens him up to being handcuffed? And if, Clyde Edwards-Helaire being so cheap, am I overstating my case here?
He's worth taking at the price that he is, and could very well be the handcuff, because he is a very good receiver out of the backfield, and he's a smart runner. He is not a physical runner. One of the things that I will be profiling at Football Guys down the line is players with contact balance, and how they grade it out from a what I call process-driven analytics. When you take a look at certain processes, how does that translate to football value, fantasy value? And I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 running backs start and perform 1,000-yard rushers or better when they couldn't defeat indirect collisions, bounce off. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't have that type of contact balance to be that exception to the rule. So I like what he can do for you, but I'd see him more in the Jerick McKinnon role. And I'd say the guy that might be even better deal will be Keontae Ingram or Deneric Prince. Neither are really getting drafted if Pacheco gets hurt. So I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire could have value for you, but the waiver wire might prove even more valuable to you.
I'm with you. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a former first-round pick fantasy-wise. I think I remember him climbing up to 6 on ADP.
Yeah, it was madness, because people comparing him to Brian Westbrook, and it was please slow down. And the Texas game, you can go to Matt Waldman RSP and check out my analysis of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, especially in that Texans game when everybody thought he was going to be the next Christian McCaffrey after one game. And look at all the flaws in his game where you're going, seriously, dude, you couldn't even get into there's some issues here, even though the production was there. The process was not good. So
since you set me up to not blow my own horn on this, I can remember telling people, pump the brakes. And that was why, because I read my rookie scouting portfolio and I said, we get a little in front of our skis on this one. I mean, I get the draft capital expended. It's a good landing spot. The scheme is great, but is he? So there's your lesson for the day, people. And that's it. We're done. We're going to come back next Monday, do this all over again. There'll be things and developments, training camps ongoing. You can catch my new podcast, Matt Waldman, new on the Audible channel at Football Guys. The daily update is basically the email update with a little extra stuff, a little context and information and player values and some discussion of that based on the news that we put up at footballguys.com. Also get my fantasy notebook every Monday. It's available there now as well. So check all that stuff out and go to mattwaldman.com. There's things there. There's Matt's stuff at Football Guys. The gut check is fantastic and chock full of information. I read it every chance I get, sometimes twice.
You have no time then after, the amount of shit I write. Let's see. But if you want to get the quick and dirty and you want to get it in a refined context, Bob Harris's work is great because you get the news, you learn what you need to know, and he delivers them with the level of experience and craft that you would come to expect from old football.
Fuck that, man! Here. Fuck that!
Look at him. We're trying to get him. We're trying. Look, I already talked about your lack of hair and how you need a CeeDee Lamb wig, and
I think we all need a CeeDee Lamb.
I just showed a Lex Luthor. I'm getting you a Lex Luthor figure, man. I like me some Lex Luthor. I gotta say.
All right. Some of us work for a living. Let's get the hell out of here.
All right.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.